The rain did not merely fall. It besieged the small town of Oak Creek, turning the familiar asphalt of the suburbs into shimmering, treacherous black rivers. Inside the cabin of his aging sedan, Liam Archer gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned a ghostly white, matching the pallor of the gray morning light filtering through the deluge. Beside him, the rhythmic, mechanical heartbeat of the windshield wipers provided a frantic soundtrack to his anxiety. Thump, 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 thump. It was a sound that seemed to mock the steady, labored breathing of his 7-year-old son, Leo, who was curled into a ball in the back seat. Liam was 34 years old, but on mornings like this, he felt as though he had lived a century. Every line on his face was a map of 3 years of solo parenting, 3 years of being the only person responsible for keeping another human being whole and alive. He was a man divided, functioning as both mother and father to a boy who still, in the quietest hours of the night, whispered for a parent who would never walk through the front door again. The gold band on his left ring finger caught a stray glint of light. He hadn't removed it in 3 years. It was no longer a symbol of a current union. It had become a talisman, a piece of armor he wore to ward off the world. It was a lie. He told to keep people at a distance, a promise to a ghost that he wasn't ready to let go. He never looked at the ring anymore, but he felt its weight. Constantly, a familiar, grounding ache that reminded him of who he used to be before the world shattered. "Dad, my stomach really hurts." Leo's voice was a fragile thread in the gloom. Liam flicked his eyes to the rearview mirror, his heart constricting at the sight of his son. Leo was pale, his skin almost translucent against the dark fabric of his car seat, with dark shadows under his eyes that no 7-year-old should carry. "I know, buddy. I know," Liam said, his voice straining for a calmness he didn't feel. "We're almost there. Dr. Sterling is going to figure it out, okay? Just hold on a little longer." This was the 3rd time in 2 weeks. At first, Liam had hoped it was just a virus, or perhaps the nerves of 2nd grade. But this morning, when Leo couldn't even keep down a piece of dry toast, the worry had shifted from a simmer to a boil. Liam had called the clinic the moment the lines opened, begging for a slot. He had managed to snag a 9 a.m. cancellation, but the digital clock on the dashboard now mocked him. 8:47 a.m. The clinic was still 15 minutes away, and the weather was worsening. He was going to be late. Again, his mind raced through the chaotic inventory of his morning, the frantic 6 a.m. wake-up call, the emergency laundry after Leo got sick, the desperate phone call to his supervisor at the warehouse explaining why he'd be late once more. He could feel his job security slipping through his fingers like the rainwater on his windshield. Desperation settled into his bones. He pressed his foot harder against the accelerator, the engine groaning in protest as the needle climbed. He was doing 47 in a 35 zone, his mind focused entirely on the red brick building of the pediatric clinic, when the world turned blue and red. The sirens were short, sharp bursts of sound that cut through the roar of the rain. "Damn it," Liam hissed under his breath, immediately biting his tongue. He tried to be careful about his language around Leo, but stress was a corrosive force that stripped away even the best intentions. "Are we in trouble, Dad?" Leo asked, his voice trembling with a new kind of fear. "No, buddy. No. Dad, I made a mistake. It's okay. I'm just going to pull over." Liam guided the car to the shoulder, the tires splashing through a deep puddle. His heart sank into his stomach. He couldn't afford this. Between the rising medical bills and the electric bill he deferred last month, a speeding ticket in Oak Creek was a luxury he simply did not have. He watched the police cruiser. In his mirror, the door opened, and a figure emerged, shrouded in a dark regulation rain jacket. As the officer approached the driver's side window, Liam rolled it down. Shivering as a gust of cold, wet air invaded the car. He had his license and registration ready. He knew the drill. Be respectful, be honest, and hope for a miracle. The officer who appeared at his window was not the stern, older man Liam had expected. Officer Elena Vance stood with a professional, composed posture that the rain couldn't touch. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe, neat bun. and her expression was a mask of practiced neutrality. But her eyes, hazel, sharp, and intensely observant, seemed to take in the entirety of Liam's life in a single glance. "License and registration, please," she said. Her voice was polite, but held the weight of authority. "Yes, ma'am. Officer, I know I was speeding. I apologize. My son has an urgent medical appointment, and we're running late." Liam handed over the documents, his hand trembling slightly. He hated how the excuse sounded, even though it was the absolute truth. It sounded like every other lie she probably heard a dozen times a shift. Elena took the papers, but her gaze didn't stay on them. Her eyes flicked to the back seat, landing on Leo. Liam watched her expression shift. The professional mask didn't break, but it softened at the edges, a flicker of human recognition, warming her sharp eyes as she saw the boy's hunched posture and pained expression. "How are you doing back there, son?" Elena asked, her voice dropping an octave into something gentler. Leo looked up, startled. "My stomach hurts," he whispered. "We have to see the doctor." Elena's eyes returned to Liam. She saw the exhaustion etched into the corners of his mouth. She saw the lack of a passenger in the front seat, no diaper bag, no second pair of eyes, no partner to share the load. And then, her gaze landed on his left hand, the gold band. It was worn, its edges smoothed by years of wear. The kind of ring that spoke of a deep, long-standing commitment. "Mr. Archer, you were doing 12 miles over the limit in a residential zone," Elena said, falling back into her official cadence. "I'm going to run your information. Stay in the vehicle." She walked back to her cruiser. Liam let his head fall back against the headrest, closing his eyes. The rain drummed against the roof like an accusation. "Dad, are you going to jail?" Liam snapped his eyes open and twisted in his seat to look at his son. "No, Leo. Absolutely not. The officer is just doing her job. Worst case, I get a ticket. But I'm not going anywhere except to the clinic. I promise I'm not leaving. You." The words hung in the air, heavier than they should have been. "I'm not leaving. You." It was a promise they both knew had been broken by someone else before. In the safety of her cruiser, Elena Vance ran Liam Archer's license. The screen, populated with a clean record. No tickets, no warrants, not even a parking violation. He was a man who followed the rules, until today. She looked through the rain-streaked windshield at the silhouette of the father in the car ahead. She thought about the wedding ring. She thought about the way he looked, not like a criminal, but like a man who was drowning and trying to keep his child above water. Elena was 31. She had been on the force for 9 years. She had seen the worst of people, but she had also learned to recognize the best of them in their worst moments. There was something about Liam Archer that felt different, genuine, safe. She found herself hesitating. She reached for her citation book, but her fingers hovered over the pages. She thought about the ring again. Taken, she told herself. A good man, committed to his family. She made a decision. She stepped back out into the rain, the water splashing against her boots. When she reached Liam's window, he looked up at her with an expression of pure, quiet defeat. "Mr. Archer," Elena said, leaning down. Rain dripped from the brim of her cap. "Your record is spotless. That tells me this isn't a habit." "No, ma'am. It's not. I was worried." "I understand." Elena met his eyes, and for a heartbeat, the badge and the uniform felt like they didn't exist. "I'm giving you a warning today. But you need to slow down. Getting into an accident won't get your son to the doctor any faster." Liam exhaled, a sound of profound relief. "Thank you, officer. Truly, I appreciate the break." Elena looked down at the warning slip, then back at Liam. A thought crossed her mind, something entirely unprofessional, something she would usually never dream of saying. But the rain and the gray morning seemed to have stripped away her own defenses. "If you weren't married," she said, her voice half joking but entirely sincere, "I'd be adding my phone number to the bottom of this warning." The silence that followed was thick and sudden. Liam stared at her, his brain struggling to process the shift in the air. Elena felt her face flush hot. Despite the cold rain, she shouldn't have said it. It was a breach of protocol. He was a married man. "I'm not," Liam said quietly. Elena blinked, her composure cracking. "What?" Married, Liam said. His hand went to the ring on his finger, his thumb tracing. The gold. I'm a widower. It's been 3 years. The weight of the word widower settled between them, heavy and cold. Elena felt a pang in her chest, not of pity, but of a sudden, sharp understanding. The ring wasn't a sign of a present. It was a shield for the past. It was a way of keeping the world at bay while he tried to figure out how to breathe again. I'm so sorry, Elena said, and she meant it. I shouldn't have said that. It was out of line. No, Liam replied, looking at her with eyes that seemed to see her for the first time, not as a cop, but as a woman. It's okay. It's actually the first time in a long time someone has looked at me as just a man. Leo watched from the back, his young mind absorbing the change in the atmosphere. The police lady didn't seem scary anymore. And his dad, looked different. The tightness in his shoulders had eased just a fraction. Elena cleared her throat, regaining her professional footing. Here is your warning, Mr. Archer. Please, drive safely. I hope your son feels better soon. She handed him the slip. Their fingers brushed for a fleeting second, a spark of warmth in the damp cold. Thank you, Officer Vance, Liam said. I'll watch my speed. Elena nodded and stepped back. She watched him pull away, his blinker clicking. Rhythmically, his speed now a careful, law-abiding pace. She stood in the rain. For a moment longer than necessary, her heart beating a rhythm she hadn't felt in a very long time. As Liam drove toward the clinic, the rain began to let up, a sliver of pale light breaking through the clouds. Dad, Leo asked from the back. Yeah, buddy. That lady was nice. Liam looked at the yellow warning slip on the passenger seat. Yeah, Leo. She really was. The weight of the ring on his finger didn't feel quite so heavy anymore. For the first time in 3 years, the future didn't look like a storm to be weathered. It looked like a road that might actually lead somewhere new. The fluorescent lights of the Oak Creek Pediatric Clinic hummed with a sterile, low-frequency buzz that usually set Liam's nerves on edge. Today, however, the adrenaline from the encounter with Officer Vance was still coursing through his veins, acting as a strange buffer against the typical waiting room anxiety. Leo sat pressed against his side, his small head resting on Liam's bicep. The boy had finally stopped crying, but his skin remained a worrying shade of parchment. Mr. Archer? Leo. A nurse with a kind smile and a clipboard appeared at the door. Liam stood, scooped Leo into his arms, despite the boy getting a bit too big for it, and followed her back. The next 45 minutes were a blur of cold stethoscopes, gentle palpations, and the soft, reassuring voice of Dr. Sterling. Liam sat on the edge of the examination table, his hands clasped so tightly they shook. He watched every flinch of Leo's face, waiting for the verdict that he feared would shatter their fragile world. The good news, Liam, Dr. Sterling said, stripping off her latex gloves and sitting on her rolling stool, is that physically, Leo is healthy. His blood work from last time was clear, and I'm not seeing any signs of an obstruction or infection. Liam felt a breath he'd been holding since the previous Tuesday finally leave his lungs. Then why the pain? Why can't he keep food down? Dr. Sterling looked at Leo, then back at Liam. Her expression was compassionate, but firm. I think what we're looking at is somatic. Stress-induced. Kids absorb the world around them like sponges, Liam. Leo has been through a lot of transition. You both have. Liam looked down at his son. Stress. At 7 years old, his son was carrying enough weight to make his own body rebel. The guilt hit Liam like a physical blow. He thought of the rushed mornings, the late nights at the warehouse, the way he sometimes stared through the glass wall of his own grief, being physically present but emotionally 1,000 miles away. We'll start him on something for the nausea, but more importantly, we need to focus on routine and reassurance, the doctor continued. He needs to know he's safe. And Liam, you need to take care of yourself, too. He sees your exhaustion. Liam nodded, though he had no idea how to follow that advice. He gathered the prescriptions and helped Leo back into his rain-dampened jacket. By the time they reached the car, the rain had settled into a soft, apologetic drizzle. Liam buckled Leo in and sat in the driver's seat, staring at the yellow warning slip still sitting on the dashboard. Officer Elena Vance. He traced the name with his eyes. She had seen it, too, the exhaustion the doctor had just mentioned. She had seen a man on the brink and chose to offer a hand instead of a shackle. His phone vibrated in his pocket. It was a text from Miller, the warehouse supervisor. Where are you? Shipment is behind. Need you on the floor now. Liam closed his eyes. He'd already burned through his sick leave. He was a good worker, strong, reliable, and capable of organizing a loading dock better than men 20 years his senior, but in the eyes of corporate management, he was the guy with the kid problem. I have to go to work, buddy, Liam said, looking at Leo in the rear view. I'm going to drop you at Mrs. Gable's for a few hours. She's got those ginger snaps you like. Leo nodded weakly. Okay, Dad. The rest of the day was a grueling exercise in manual labor and mental distraction. The warehouse was a cavernous, echoing space filled with the smell of diesel and cardboard. Liam spent 6 hours moving pallets, his back aching, his mind constantly drifting back to a pair of hazel eyes and a voice that had told him he was just a man. Once, Liam had lived a different life. Before the accident, he had been a project manager for a thriving tech startup. He had worn button-down shirts, attended meetings in glass-walled boardrooms, and talked about scalability and market trajectories. But when his wife, Sarah, died, the light had gone out of that world. The insurance money had been a cushion, but not a bed. The high-stress demands of his old career were impossible for a man who needed to be at school gates by 3 p.m. and who spent his nights rocking a grieving child. He had traded his suit for a reflective vest and his laptop for a forklift, seeking a simpler life that paid the bills and left his mind free to wander, even if it usually wandered to dark places. He picked up Leo from the babysitter at 6 p.m. The house on Oakmont Drive felt particularly quiet that evening, as he made a simple dinner of buttered noodles, bland enough for Leo's stomach. Liam found himself constantly glancing at his left hand, the wedding ring. He had married Sarah Mitchell in a small courthouse ceremony 7 years ago. They had been young, idealistic, and convinced they were invincible. Sarah had been the vibrant one, the one who hummed when she cooked and danced in the living room for no reason. When she was killed by a driver who had just looked down for a second, Liam's world had narrowed to a single point. Leo? He had worn the ring as armor. It told the women at the grocery store and the sympathetic mothers at the park that he wasn't available. It told the world he was still spoken for, still tied to a ghost. It was a way of staying loyal to a memory. But that morning, a woman had looked at him, really looked at him, and the armor had cracked. Dad, why are you staring at the noodles? Liam blinked, coming back to the present. Leo was sitting at the table, looking a bit more color in his cheeks. Just thinking, buddy. Eat your dinner. The following Saturday was a rare, sun-drenched break in the autumn chill. Liam had promised Leo ice cream if he had a good stomach week, and Leo had held him to it. They drove to Sweetwater's, a local favorite downtown, where the smell of sugar and waffle cones hung heavy in the air. The shop was crowded with Saturday revelers. Liam and Leo stood in line, Leo debating the merits of mint chip versus chocolate. I think you should go with the mint, Leo. It's a classic, a voice said from behind them. Liam froze. He knew that voice. He turned slowly, and there she was. Officer Elena Vance was unrecognizable in civilian clothes. She wore dark jeans and a soft, cream-colored sweater that made her eyes look like mossy forests. Her hair was down, falling in waves around her shoulders, a stark contrast to the severe bun she'd worn on the road. She looked younger, softer, and Liam realized with a jolt, breathtakingly beautiful. Officer Vance, Liam said, his voice caught in his throat. Elena, please, she corrected, a small, genuine smile tugging at her lips. I'm off the clock. And hello again, Leo. You look like you're feeling much better. Leo's eyes went wide. The police lady. Dad, it's the lady who gave you the chance. Elena laughed, a warm, melodic sound that seemed to brighten the entire shop. I'm glad to see you on your feet, Leo. And I'm glad to see your dad isn't in a hurry today. Liam felt his face flush. No speeding today. We're just here for the mint. Chip. A worthy cause, Elena said. She looked at Liam, and for a moment, the bustling shop faded into the background. There was a vulnerability in her eyes that mirrored his own. I'm glad I ran into you. I've thought about that. Morning quite a bit. So have I, Liam admitted. Dad, are we going to stand in line forever? Leo asked, tugging on Liam's hand. They got their ice cream. Mint chip for Leo, black coffee for Liam, and salted caramel for Elena. Liam found himself doing something he hadn't done in 3 years. He invited her to sit with them. They sat at a small table by the window. Leo did most of the talking, regaling Elena with stories about his school's science fair and his collection of smooth stones. Elena listened with a focused intensity that made Leo beam. She didn't talk down to him. She treated him like a person. My dad says you're a hero, Leo said through a mouthful of green ice cream. Elena looked at Liam, her eyebrows raised. Does he now? He said you do your job to keep people safe, Leo clarified. But I think you're a hero because you were nice when Dad was scared. Liam looked at his coffee, feeling the heat in his ears. Leo, I think we're oversharing. It's okay, Elena said softly. She reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of Liam's. I don't get called a hero very often for traffic stops. I'll take it. An hour passed like a few minutes. They talked about the town, about the difficulty of being a cop in a small community, and about the weight of responsibility. Liam found himself telling her things he hadn't even told the few friends he had left, about the glass wall, about the struggle to find himself again. When it was time to go, they walked out to the sidewalk. The afternoon sun was beginning to dip, casting long, golden shadows across the street. Thank you, Liam, Elena said. I needed this more than I realized. Me too, Liam said. Leo looked up at his father, then at Elena. Dad, aren't you supposed to ask for her number? That's what they do in the movies when people like each other. Liam wanted the sidewalk to swallow him whole. Leo, that's not. But Elena was already laughing. She pulled a small notepad and a pen from her purse. She scribbled something down, tore off the sheet, and handed it to Liam. Leo's a smart kid, Liam. You should listen to him more often. Liam took the paper. It was just a series of 10 digits, but it felt like a lifeline. I will. I'll call you. Maybe dinner? Just us. I'd like that very much, Elena said. She leaned in and gave Leo a high five, then offered Liam a look that promised a future he hadn't thought possible. That night, after Leo was tucked into bed and the house was silent, Liam sat on the edge of his bed. He looked at the photograph on his nightstand. Sarah, smiling on a beach in better times. I think it's time, Sarah, he whispered to the empty room. I think you'd want me to keep going. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for his left hand. He twisted the gold band. It was stubborn at first, as if it didn't want to leave the skin it had occupied for 7 years. But with a final tug, it slid off. Liam looked at his bare finger. There was a pale indentation there, a ghostly reminder of where the ring had been. He felt a sudden, sharp pang of grief, followed by a rush of something else, freedom. He walked to his dresser and placed the ring in a small wooden box alongside his watch and a few old cufflinks. He wasn't throwing it away. He was simply putting it in its proper place, the past. He picked up his phone and found the number Elena had given him. He typed a short message. Hey, it's Liam. I'd really love to take you to dinner on Tuesday. Leo wants to know if you like superheroes. He hit send. A minute later, the phone buzzed. Tuesday is perfect. And tell Leo that I'm more of a Wonder Woman fan myself. Liam smiled. He lay back on his bed, the weight on his chest finally lifting. He wasn't Leo's dad and Sarah's widower anymore. He was just Liam. And for the first time in 1,000 days, that was more than enough. The pale skin of Liam's ringed finger felt unnervingly sensitive, as if the nerves there had been shielded from the world for too long and were now screaming at the touch of the morning air. It was Sunday, the day after his ice cream encounter with Elena, and as Liam stood in the kitchen brewing coffee, he kept reaching with his thumb to twist a ghost. His hand would graze empty skin, and a hollow pang would vibrate through his chest, a mix of phantom limb syndrome and a lingering, serrated guilt. He had placed Sarah's ring in the wooden box on his dresser, tucked beneath a layer of felt. It wasn't gone, but the silence of its absence on his hand felt deafening. Dad? Your finger is white there. Liam looked down. Leo was standing at the kitchen island, peering at his father's hand with the devastatingly sharp perception only a child possesses. The boy's stomach issues seemed better this morning, but his eyes were still large and searching. Liam took a breath, leaning against the counter. Yeah, buddy. I decided to put the ring in the box with my special things. Leo was silent for a long moment, his gaze shifting from the bare finger to his father's face. Because of the police lady? Elena? Partly, Liam admitted, crouching down so he was at eye level with his son. But also because Mom is in our hearts now, Leo. She's not in the ring. I thought it was time to let my hand feel a bit lighter. Is that okay with you? Leo chewed on his lip, considering the weight of the moment. Will you forget her? Never, Liam said, his voice cracking with a fierce, sudden intensity. He pulled Leo into a hug, burying his face in the boy's hair, which smelled like sleep and strawberry shampoo. I could never forget her, but I think Mom would want us to make new friends. I think she'd want me to be happy. Leo pulled back, a small, tentative smile touching his lips. I think so too. Elena is cool. She said Wonder Woman could beat anyone. The rest of the morning was spent in a forced kind of normalcy. They went to the park, Liam kicking a soccer ball around with Leo, though his mind was a storm of anticipation for Tuesday. Every time his phone buzzed, his heart did a frantic somersault. Elena had texted him a follow-up. I know a quiet place called the Blue Oak. 7 p.m. It was a date. A real, actual date. Monday, however, brought the weight of reality back with a vengeance. The warehouse was a humid, grinding machine of productivity, and Liam's supervisor, Miller, was in a foul mood. A shipment of heavy machinery parts had arrived, damaged, and the entire loading dock was under fire. Archer, stop daydreaming and get that forklift to Bay 4. Miller barked, his face a shade of angry crimson. Liam wiped sweat from his brow, his muscles screaming. He spent 10 hours moving heavy crates, the physical exertion a grim contrast to the light, fluttering hope he had felt over the weekend. By the time he punched out at 5:30 p.m., his back was a knot of agony, and his hands were stained with grease and dust. As he walked to his car, he looked at his bare finger. It was covered in a thin layer of warehouse grime. He felt a sudden, crushing sense of imposter syndrome. Who was he kidding? He was a broken widower working a dead-end job, trying to pretend he could date a woman like Elena Vance, a woman with a career, a badge, and a future that didn't involve counting crates in a dark warehouse. The silence of the car ride home was heavy. He felt the old gravity of his grief, trying to pull him back down, whispering that he was overstepping, that he was trying to replace the irreplaceable. Tuesday arrived with a sky the color of bruised plums. Leo had a slight return of his stomach butterflies that morning, which Liam managed to soothe with extra cuddles and a promise that Mrs. Gable would bring over the Lion King DVD. Liam spent an hour getting ready. He shaved with meticulous care, the razor scraping away the scruff he'd allowed to grow over the past few days. He chose a dark navy button-down shirt that Sarah had bought him years ago, one of the few things from his old life that still fit. He looked in the mirror and didn't entirely recognize the man looking back. The eyes were still tired, but there was a spark of something, defiance, perhaps, that hadn't been there before. When Mrs. Gable arrived, she gave Liam a knowing, grandmotherly wink. You look handsome, Liam. Go on. Don't worry about Leo. We're going to build a fort. Liam arrived at the Blue Oak 5 minutes early. It was a small, dimly lit bistro on the edge of town, with exposed brick walls and the smell of roasted garlic and red wine. He sat in a corner booth, his hands tucked under the table, feeling like a teenager on his first prom night. Then, the door opened. Elena was wearing a simple black wrap dress and a light trench coat. She looked elegant, but it was the way she carried herself, with a quiet, grounded strength that drew Liam's breath away. She spotted him and smiled, a flash of warmth that immediately dispelled the warehouse gloom still clinging to his psyche. You look great, Liam, she said, sliding into the booth across from him. I could say the same. Honestly, I'm a little intimidated, Liam said, a nervous laugh escaping him. I haven't done this in, well, you know. Elena reached out, her fingers brushing his forearm. Me neither. Not for a long time. Being a cop in this town doesn't exactly make for a thriving dating life. Most people are either afraid of me or want to ask about their speeding tickets. Liam smiled, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease. I promise not to ask about the ticket. I'm just happy to be here. The conversation started with Leo, a safe, neutral territory. Elena asked about his doctor's appointment, and Liam shared the somatic stress diagnosis. It makes sense, Elena said, swirling the wine in her glass. Children don't have the vocabulary for grief, so their bodies speak for them. My younger sister was the same way when our parents divorced. She had migraines for a year. As the night progressed and the wine began to work its magic, the conversation shifted. The light-hearted talk about Leo and the town faded into something deeper, something heavier. Why Oak Creek? Liam asked. You seem like someone who could have made it in the city. Big city PD, fast track to detective. Elena's expression clouded for a moment. She looked at her glass, the silence between them growing thick. I was in the city 6 years ago. I was a beat officer in Chicago. Liam waited, sensing the weight of the story. There was a call, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. A domestic. I was young. I thought I could handle it. My partner, he was an older guy, 3 weeks from retirement. We walked into a situation we hadn't prepared for. He was shot, Liam, right in front of me. Liam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the restaurant's air conditioning. I did everything right, Elena continued, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere past Liam's shoulder. I returned fire. I called it in. I applied the tourniquet. But the silence in that hallway while I waited for the ambulance, it never left me. I realized I didn't want the city's noise anymore. I wanted a place where I could see the faces of the people I was protecting. I wanted to matter in a way that wasn't just a statistic. I'm so sorry, Liam said, his hand instinctively reaching for hers. This time, she didn't pull away. Her skin was warm, and her grip was surprisingly strong. What about you, Liam? She asked, her gaze locking onto his. You weren't always a warehouseman. I can see the corporate ghost in you. Liam laughed, a dry, bittersweet sound. Was it that obvious? He told her about the startup, the meetings, the frantic pace of a life built on digital shadows. He told her about the day Sarah died, the phone call that arrived while he was in the middle of a presentation about user engagement. The irony wasn't lost on me, Liam said. I was talking about engagement and my entire world had just disengaged. After the funeral, I couldn't go back. Every time I looked at a computer screen, I saw the reflection of a man who had lost everything that mattered. I needed to move boxes. I needed to feel the weight of something real in my hands. They sat in silence for a long time, the weight of their shared honesty hanging between them. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was a recognition. Two people, both scarred by the noise of their pasts, seeking a quiet place to land. Liam looked down at their joined hands. For the first time, he realized he wasn't wearing the ring. Elena noticed it too. You took it off, she said softly. I did. Saturday night. How does it feel? Like I'm standing in the wind without a coat, Liam admitted. Cold. But I can breathe better. He leaned in, and she did too. The space between them narrowed, the air crackling with an electric, long-dormant tension. But then, Liam's phone on the table began to vibrate with a violent, jarring urgency. It was Mrs. Gable. Liam's heart plummeted. He snatched the phone up. Hello? Mrs. Gable? Is everything okay? Liam, you need to come home. The sitter's voice was frantic over the background sound of Leo's sobbing. He's got that pain again, and he's been sick. He's calling for you. The bubble burst. The bistro, the wine, the beautiful woman across from him. It all vanished, replaced by the cold, hard reality of his life. I'm on my way, Liam said, sliding out of the booth. He looked at Elena, his face a mask of apology and despair. I have to go. It's Leo. Elena stood up immediately. I'll go with you. No, Elena, you don't have to. Liam, I'm a first responder. And more importantly, I'm your friend. Let's go. The drive home was a blur of rain and silence. The weight had returned, heavier than ever. Liam felt a familiar, bitter anger at himself. How could he have thought he could have this? How could he have left his son alone, even for a few hours, when he knew the boy was fragile? When they burst into the house, the sound of Leo's crying was like a knife to Liam's ribs. He found the boy in the living room fort, curled into a ball, Mrs. Gable hovering over him with a wet washcloth. Liam was on the floor in an instant, pulling Leo into his lap. "I'm here, buddy. I'm here. Dad's here." Leo clung to him, his small body shaking with tremors. Elena stayed back by the door, her presence a quiet, steadying shadow. She watched Liam, watched the way his entire being focused on the boy, the way he whispered reassurances, the way his hands, though rough from the warehouse, were as gentle as a mother's. It took an hour to calm Leo down, to get him to sip some ginger ale and finally drift into an exhausted sleep in Liam's arms. Mrs. Gable left with a quiet apology, leaving Liam and Elena alone in the dimly lit living room. Liam sat on the sofa, his head in his hands. The silence of the house was oppressive. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "This isn't exactly how I wanted the date to end." Elena sat beside him, not touching him, but close enough that he could feel her warmth. "Liam, look at me." He looked up. Her hazel eyes were filled with an expression he couldn't quite place. It wasn't pity. It was something much deeper. "This is your life," she said, "and I'm not afraid of it. I've seen enough perfect lives to know they're usually hollow. What you have here, the way you love that boy, it's the most real thing I've seen in a long time." "But it's a mess, Elena," Liam said, a tear finally escaping and tracking through the warehouse dust still in the creases of his skin. "I'm a mess." "Then we're a pair," she said. She reached out and took his bare hand, her fingers interlacing with his. "Because I'm a mess too. And maybe two messes can make something beautiful." Liam looked at their joined hands, the pale skin where the ring had been, and the strong, steady hand of the woman holding him. The weight of the silence was still there, but for the first time, it didn't feel like it was crushing him. It felt like a foundation. Outside, the rain began to fall again, a soft tapping against the window pane. But inside the small house on Oakmont Drive, the silence finally felt peaceful. The morning light that filtered through the kitchen window was unusually thin, a pale, watery yellow that barely managed to illuminate the remnants of the previous night's chaos. Elena had stayed. She hadn't slept in Liam's bed. They weren't there yet, but she had refused to leave the house, claiming the guest room with a quiet, determined air that broached no argument. Liam stood at the stove, the smell of sizzling bacon filling the small space. His back felt like a sheet of rusted metal, each movement a reminder of the 10-hour shift he'd put in the day before. But as he looked at Elena, who was sitting at the kitchen table in a borrowed sweatshirt, her hair messy and her hazel eyes soft with sleep, the ache seemed to recede. "He's still out," Liam said, nodding toward the hallway. "The medicine usually knocks him out for a good 12 hours once the adrenaline fades." Elena wrapped her hands around a mug of coffee. "He's a resilient kid, Liam. But he's exhausted. Not just physically, but emotionally." Liam sat down across from her, his bare left hand resting on the table. The pale indentation where his ring had been was still visible, a ghostly mark on his skin. "I feel like I'm failing him. I try to be everything, and I end up being not enough of anything. I go to work to keep the roof over his head, and his head starts hurting because I'm not here." Elena reached across the table, her hand covering his. "That's the paradox of the single parent, Liam. You're trapped in a circle where the solution is also the problem. But you're not alone anymore. Not if you don't want to be." Liam looked at her, searching for the fear he expected to see. Most people, when faced with the reality of a widower's life, the sick child, the dead-end job, the lingering ghost of a previous marriage, ran for the hills. But Elena was still there. She had seen the mess, and she hadn't flinched. "Why are you staying?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Elena was silent for a moment, her gaze drifting to the window. In Chicago, after the shooting, everyone wanted to help for about a week. They brought casseroles, they sent cards, they said the right things. But then life moved on. For them. I was left in that quiet hallway, and the world expected me to just be okay. I learned that the rarest thing in the world isn't a hero. It's someone who stays after the sirens stop. She looked back at him, her grip on his hand tightening. I want to be the one who stays, Liam. The moment was interrupted by the heavy, rhythmic thumping of footsteps. Leo appeared in the doorway, his hair a tangled nest, his eyes bleary. He stopped, looking at Elena, then at his father. Is the police lady still here? He asked, his voice scratchy. I'm still here, Leo, Elena said with a warm smile. And I heard a rumor that your dad makes the best bacon in Oak Creek. Leo's face brightened, the shadows under his eyes seeming to lift just a fraction. He scrambled into a chair next to Elena. He does, but sometimes he burns the edges. I do not burn the edges, Liam protested, though he was grinning. I call it caramelized. For the next hour, the house felt lighter than it had in years. They ate breakfast, the conversation flowing easily from Leo's favorite cartoons to Elena's stories about her mischievous German shepherd, Rex. The silence that usually hung over the house like a heavy shroud was replaced by the clatter of silverware and the sound of Leo's high-pitched giggles. But the peace was a fragile thing. When Liam walked Elena to her car an hour later, the autumn air had turned sharp. I have a shift starting at noon, she said, leaning against the driver's side door. But I'll check in later. And Liam, don't go into that warehouse today. With your head down. You're doing a good job. I'll try, he said. He reached out, his hand grazing her cheek. Thank you for everything. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing for a second. I'll see you soon. As she drove away, Liam felt a surge of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. But as he turned back toward the house, the reality of his situation came crashing back. He had to go to work. He had a mortgage to pay, medical bills to settle, and a supervisor who was looking for any excuse to replace him. He dropped Leo at his sister-in-law's house, Sarah's sister, Megan. It was always a complicated visit. Megan looked so much like Sarah that it sometimes made Liam's chest ache, but she was the only one who truly understood the depth of the loss. He looks better, Liam, Megan said, watching Leo run into the backyard to play with his cousins. But you look like you're about to collapse. I'm fine, Megan. Just a late night. Megan looked at his left hand, her eyes widening. The ring. You took it off. Liam felt a flare of defensiveness. It was time. Megan didn't argue. She just nodded, a sad, knowing smile on her face. Sarah would be happy, you know. She always hated how you worried about what people thought. She'd want you to live. I am living, Liam said, though it felt like a half-truth. The warehouse was a nightmare of epic proportions. A water pipe had burst in the night, soaking a third of the inventory, and Miller was in a state of near apoplectic rage. Archer, where the hell were you this morning? Miller shouted as Liam walked onto the floor. I had a family emergency, Miller. I messaged you. I don't care about your messages. I have 20 pallets of electronics that are currently sponges. Get on the forklift and start moving the dry stock to the West Wing. If you stop for a breath, don't bother coming back tomorrow. Liam gritted his teeth. He worked like a man possessed, the physical strain acting as a vent for his frustration. He moved crates until his arms felt like lead, his mind a repetitive loop of Elena's voice and Leo's laughter. By the afternoon, the exhaustion began to take its toll. He was backing the forklift into a tight corner when a sudden, sharp pain flared in his lower back, the result of years of heavy lifting and a lack of proper rest. He winced, his foot slipping off the brake for a fraction of a second. The forklift lurched, the corner of the pallet clipping a racking upright. It wasn't a major collision, but in the tense atmosphere of the warehouse, it sounded like a gunshot. Miller was there in seconds. That's it. Archer, get off the machine. It was a slip, Miller. My back. I don't want to hear about your back. I don't want to hear about your kid. You're a liability, Archer. You're distracted, you're unreliable, and now you're damaging the equipment. Go home. Don't come back. We'll mail you your final check. Liam stood on the warehouse floor, the silence of the massive space suddenly more deafening than the machinery. He looked around at the stacks of crates, the smell of dust and diesel, and realized he was mourning the loss of a job he hated. It wasn't the work he would miss, it was the safety, the invisibility. He walked to the locker room, stripped off his reflective vest, and threw it in the trash. The drive to pick up Leo was a blur. The weight had returned, heavier and more suffocating than ever. He was 34, a widower, and now he was unemployed. How was he supposed to tell Elena? How was he supposed to tell Leo? When he arrived at Megan's, he found Leo sitting on the porch, his face pale. Again. Dad? Why are you home early? Liam forced a smile, though it felt like a lie. Just finished early, buddy. Let's go home. But Leo wasn't fooled. Did you lose your job? Children had a way of cutting through the bullshit that adults used to survive. Liam sat on the porch step next to his son. Yeah, Leo. I did. But it's okay. I'll find something else. Something better. Is it because of me? Leo's voice was small, trembling. Because you had to. Come home for me. Liam pulled the boy into his lap, his heart breaking. No. No, Leo. Never think that. It's because that place wasn't the right fit for me. It's because I'm a better man than they deserved. We're going to be fine. I promise. But as he sat in the deepening twilight, Liam felt the old, cold fear creeping back. He felt the urge to go to the dresser, to put the ring back on, to retreat into the silent, safe world of his grief where nothing was expected of him and no one could be disappointed. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Elena. Finished my shift. I'm picking up pizza. See you in 10? Liam stared at the screen. He wanted to tell her not to come. He wanted to tell her that the mess had just gotten exponentially worse. But then he remembered her words. I want to be the one who stays. He took a breath. See you in 10. When Elena arrived, she took one look at Liam's face and set the pizza boxes down on the counter. What happened? Liam told her. He told her about Miller, the forklift, and the finality of the dismissal. He stood in his kitchen, the man who had once managed multi-million-dollar projects, feeling like a failure. Elena didn't offer platitudes. She didn't say everything would be fine. She walked over to him, took his face in her hands, and looked him in the eyes. Good, she said. Liam blinked. Good? Elena, I can't pay the mortgage with good. It's good because you were dying in that place, Liam. I've seen you after those shifts. You were becoming a shadow. You're a brilliant, capable man who was hiding in a warehouse because it was easier than being seen. Now, you have to be seen. I'm scared, Elena, Liam admitted, the words finally breaking free. I know. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Liam. It's the decision that something else is more important. Your life is more important than that warehouse. Leo's happiness is more important than your invisibility. She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. And I'm not going anywhere. I've lived through a Chicago winter and a shootout. I can survive a career change. The weeks that followed were a testament to the courage to stay. Liam began the grueling process of re-entering the professional world. He spent his days at the local library, his laptop open, his resume being polished until it shone. He faced rejection after rejection, overqualified, too much of a gap, not the right fit, but every time he came home defeated, Elena was there. She became a fixture in their lives. She helped Leo with his homework, the boys' somatic pain slowly receding as the house became filled with the noise of life. She and Liam took Leo to the community harvest festival, the three of them, walking through the corn maze, their laughter echoing in the crisp air. One evening, while Leo was asleep, Elena and Liam sat on the porch, a blanket draped over their laps. I got a call today, Liam said, his voice quiet. A tech firm in the city. They saw my old work. They want me to come in for an interview. It's a senior role. High-level project management. Elena smiled, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. That's amazing. Liam, it's what you're meant to do. It would mean going back to the city. It would mean the noise, the pace, the life I had with Sarah. Elena took his hand, her thumb tracing the spot where the ring had been. The indentation was almost gone now, replaced by a slight tan from their days at the park. You're not that man anymore, Liam. You're a man who knows what matters. You can take the job without losing yourself. Will you come with me, he asked. If it happens. Not now, but eventually. Elena looked out at the quiet street, the silence of Oak Creek finally feeling like a choice rather than a refuge. I've spent a long time hiding here, Liam. Just like you were hiding in that warehouse. I think I'm ready to stop hiding. The courage to stay wasn't just about sticking around when things were hard. It was about the courage to stay true to the people they had become. The interview was a week later. Liam wore his best suit, his heart hammering against his ribs, as he sat in the glass-walled office, looking out at the city skyline. He felt a sudden, sharp pang of memory. But then, he reached into his pocket and felt the small, smooth stone Leo had given him for good luck. He didn't talk about scalability or market trajectories as abstract concepts. He talked about people. He talked about the importance of reliability, of seeing the faces of those you were working for, of building something real. He got the job. The move back to the city was a slow, deliberate process. They didn't rush. They found a small house in a quiet neighborhood, a place with a backyard for Rex and a room for Leo that was filled with light. On their last night in Oak Creek, Liam stood in the empty living room of the house on Oakmont Drive. The silence was there, as it always was, but it didn't feel like an accusation. It felt like a memory. Elena walked in, her badge glinting in the twilight. She had transferred to a precinct in the suburbs, a role that allowed her to be a protector without losing herself in the noise. "You okay?" she asked, sliding her arm around his waist. "Yeah," Liam said. He looked at his bare hand, then at hers. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. He didn't say anything at first. He just opened it. Inside was a simple modern band, no gold, just brushed titanium. "I don't want to replace the past," he said, his voice steady. "But I want to build a future. I want to be the one who stays, Elena. For as long as you'll have me." Elena's hazel eyes filled with tears, but her smile was the brightest thing he had ever seen. "I think I can handle that." He slid the ring onto his finger. It felt different, lighter, colder, but somehow more permanent. It wasn't armor. It was a promise. They walked out of the house together, Leo running ahead of them, his laughter a vibrant, living thing in the evening air. The sirens had stopped a long time ago, and the silence of the night was no longer something to be feared. It was simply the space between two hearts that had finally found their way home. The new house was a sprawling, light-filled Victorian on the quiet edge of the city's historic district. It was a structure of sturdy oak and stained glass, a far cry from the cramped, shadow-filled house on Oakmont Drive. If the house in Oak Creek had been a fortress designed to keep the world out, this new home was a vessel designed to let the light in. Moving day was a symphony of organized chaos. Boxes were the bricks of their transition, stacked high in every room, labeled in Elena's precise police-trained handwriting and Liam's hurried, executive scrawl. Rex, Elena's German shepherd, bounded through the hallways, his claws clicking a frantic rhythm on the polished hardwood, while Leo trailed behind him with a roll of bubble wrap, his laughter echoing in the high ceilings. Liam stood in the center of the living room, a heavy box of books in his arms. He looked at Elena, who was perched on a step stool, hanging a set of sheer curtains that caught the afternoon sun. She looked back at him, her face flushed. From the effort, a smudge of dust on her cheek. "It doesn't feel like a museum," she noted, jumping down and wiping her hands on her jeans. "It feels like a beginning." "It is," Liam said, setting the box down. He walked over to her, his titanium ring glinting. He still caught himself reaching for the ghost of the gold band. Occasionally, but the sensation was fading, replaced by the cool, solid reality of the now. The integration of their broken pieces was a delicate process. It wasn't about erasing their previous lives. It was about finding a way to make them coexist. In the dining room, they placed the heavy farmhouse table that had belonged to Elena's parents. In the den, Liam set up the worn leather armchair where he had spent 1,000 nights rocking Leo. The most significant moment came when they reached the mantelpiece. Liam held a framed photograph of Sarah, the one from the beach, vibrant and full of life. Beside him, Elena held a small, tarnished silver frame containing a photo of her Chicago partner, Miller, the man she had lost in the hallway. There was a long, weighted silence as they looked at the two pieces of their past. "Do you think it's too much?" Liam asked softly. Elena shook her head, her gaze steady. No. These people are why we are who we are, Liam. If we hide them, we're hiding the parts of ourselves that learned how to love and how to survive. They belong here. One by one, they placed the photos on the mantel. Sarah's bright smile sat alongside the stoic, kind face of the fallen officer. Between them, they placed a new photo, a Polaroid taken at the ice cream shop, featuring Liam, Elena, and Leo, all wearing messy chocolate grins. It was a triptych of their existence. The love they had lost, the trauma they had survived, and the home they were building from the fragments. The following Monday, the noise of the city returned in earnest. Liam's first day at the tech firm was a sensory explosion. The office was a high-tech marvel of glass, steel, and collaborative spaces. As he sat in his new executive suite, the city's pulse thrumming beneath his feet, he felt a brief, sharp flare of the old anxiety. For a moment, he was the man loading crates, the man drowning in a warehouse, waiting for the sky to fall. But then, he looked at his desk. Beside his monitor was a small, cracked ceramic bowl. He had found it in a box of Sarah's things. It had been broken during the move to Oak Creek, and he had never had the heart to throw it away. Before moving to the city, Elena had taken the bowl. She had researched a Japanese art called kintsugi, the practice of repairing broken pottery with lacquer mixed with powdered gold. She had spent 3 nights meticulously joining the shards, filling the cracks with shimmering gold veins. It's more beautiful because it was broken, she had told him when she gave it back. The gold doesn't hide the cracks, it honors them. Liam ran his thumb over a gold-filled vein. The anxiety receded. He wasn't the man he used to be, and he wasn't the man from the warehouse. He was a man who had been shattered and repaired, and the gold in his cracks made him stronger than he had ever been. He picked up his headset and began his first meeting. He spoke with a quiet, grounded authority that commanded the room. He didn't talk about disrupting the market. He talked about sustainable growth and human-centric design. He was a leader who had seen the bottom, and his team sensed a depth in him that no MBA could provide. At 3:30 p.m., his phone buzzed. A photo from Elena, Leo, standing in front of his new school, his backpack looking twice as big as him, giving a double thumbs up to the camera. No stomach butterflies today, the caption read. He told his teacher his dad is a project hero and his bonus mom is a superhero. Liam smiled, a lump forming in his throat. Bonus mom. They hadn't used that word yet, but hearing it felt like the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. The first month in the Victorian was a whirlwind of discovery. They learned the house's quirks, the way the third step creaked like a cello, the way the kitchen stayed warm long after the oven was off, the way the light hit the garden at exactly 4 p.m. Elena's transition was equally profound. Her new role in the suburban precinct allowed her to be the investigator she was born to be, but without the soul-crushing anonymity of the city. She came home most nights with stories of community outreach and solved petty thefts, her eyes bright with a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. One Friday evening, as a soft autumn rain began to tap against the stained glass, they gathered in the kitchen for pizza and puzzle night, a new tradition Leo had inaugurated. "Dad, look, I found the edge piece for the lighthouse," Leo shouted, his face glowing in the warm amber light of the kitchen pendants. Rex was curled at Elena's feet, and the house smelled of wood smoke and pepperoni. Liam looked around the room, his heart full to bursting. He saw Elena laughing as she tried to steal a piece of crust from Leo, her titanium band. Catching the light, he saw the kintsugi bowl holding Leo's favorite stones. He saw the life they had crafted, not out of perfection, but out of resilience. Later, after Leo had fallen asleep and the house had settled into its peaceful evening hush, Liam and Elena sat on the back porch. The rain had stopped, leaving the world smelling of damp earth and fallen leaves. "I used to think silence was a lack of something," Liam said, leaning his head back against the porch swing. In Oak Creek, silence was a vacuum. It was the space where Sarah used to be. Elena leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. "And now," Liam said, his voice a low, steady rumble of contentment. Silence is a presence. It's the sound of us being okay. It's the sound of a home that isn't afraid of its own history. Elena reached out, her fingers interlacing with his. The titanium ring and her own matching band met in the dark. We're not the people we were when we met in the rain, Liam, she whispered. We're something new, something better. A home built from broken pieces, Liam agreed. He looked up at the stars, which were beginning to peek through the retreating clouds. He thought of the gold band in the wooden box, and he thought of the man. He had been shaking, terrified, and speeding through the rain to save his son. He felt a quiet wave of gratitude for that man, for the desperation that had led him to a shoulder on the road, and for the woman who had chosen to stay. The sirens had long since faded. The silence was no longer heavy. It was light. It was golden. It was home.